Series and podcast where we discuss issues of concern to New York's Jewish community and learn about our friends and partners who are leaders in New York City and beyond. I'm your host, Michael Miller, the Executive Vice President and CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. And on each episode of The Corner, we're joined by guests representing the political, religious, economic, and diverse community leadership in New York, many of whom I've had the honor of knowing and getting to know during the course of my tenure at JCRC-NY. Together, we're going to explore topics which span their interests, their backgrounds, and current events impacting on the New York Jewish community and all of us as New Yorkers to explore the state of our city, of our state, and our nation, and even the world. But first, a word of thanks to our sponsor. And this episode of the Community Relations Corner is sponsored by the Free Synagogue of Flushing, serving the Reformed Jewish community in Queens for over a century. Visit freesynagogueflushing.org to view its magnificent stained glass sanctuary and immerse yourself in a piece of Queens Jewish history. All are invited to join for a wide array of programming and webinars, and the beautiful sanctuary, social hall, and meditation garden are available for rental to add to your joyous occasions. Check out freesynagogueflushing.org to learn about their Shabbat, their Sabbath, and high holiday services, with Yom Kippur coming up on Sunday night and Monday, and their weekly Sunday school. So once again, please visit freesynagogueflushing.org, and thank you very much for sponsoring this episode. And now I'm honored to introduce our guest for today on the Community Relations Corner, and that's my dear friend and colleague, Jennifer Jones Austin, the CEO and Executive Director of the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies. So welcome, Jennifer.
Good to see you. Good to be with you. I enjoy this time with you.
Thank you. Thank you. For our viewing and listening for our viewers and listeners, our viewing and listening audience, this is kind of like getting inside of a conversation between two colleagues and friends, which has been ongoing for the course of the past several months. Jennifer and I have had pretty much weekly conversations to just kind of keep up with each other, how we're handling the pandemic, what we are doing, and we talk about some matters also of spirit, of religion, of philosophy, theology, all different kinds of things. And so we're going to have our conversation here today in front of all of you. And I hope that you get as much out of the conversation that I believe that Jennifer and I do on a weekly basis. So first of all, Jennifer, many on the call may not know who you are and what your background is. So can you tell us just where you were born, who were your parents, and why you are where you are?
So I'm so excited to be with you. I enjoy our time together, week in and week out. When I look back, and I'm going to be able to one day look back upon this COVID moment, not continually be in it, but look back upon it. When I look back and I count my blessings, you will certainly be among them, because you have been a constant source of friendship, encouragement, and inspiration during this time. So I'm glad for our friendship, and I'm blessed by you. Here's an interesting little bit of information and trivia in this moment. So there's this list that this magazine puts out, the city and state, like Brooklyn Power. And just yesterday, the list came out, and I happen to be on the Brooklyn Power list. It's a Brooklyn Power 50 list. Now, the only reason I bring this up, because these things, like who nominates you, what kind of votes you get, who knows, right? Anybody and everybody could be on the list. But the reason why I'm tickled by it in this moment is, and reminded of it, is that my father, 50 years ago, this time, 50 years ago, was voted the #1 leading Brooklynite. Uh,
Really?
the #1 leading Brooklynite.
Wow.
And so today I'm number 21.
Well, there's a
And
one
if
in
he
it.
were alive today, I'd say, I'm #1 in your book and maybe my mother's book, right? But I'd be able to say, Dad, I'm not #1, but I made the cut. And it all comes full circle because I am a product of my childhood in my home, my mother and my father, and the way that they'd raised me. My father, a third generation faith leader, who had a church here in Brooklyn, New York, that was seen as the epicenter of faith-based social justice in New York. He was also part of the National Civil Rights Movement, having founded, along with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Progressive National Baptist Convention, having served as the president of the economic arm of Southern Christian Leadership Conference. When King was president, my father was president of the economic arm, Operation Breadbasket, and he was head of the New York chapter of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So I grew up in a household where faith and social justice were very much a part of my daily learnings and exposure. And then I also was raised by my mother, who, like my father, was born and raised in the South, both Black persons. My mother was told when she told her high school teachers that she wanted to study the arts and work in the arts when she graduated from college, she was told that Black people don't work in the arts. You need to figure out something more practical in nature because there's really no place and space for Black persons in the arts. She went on to become the first Black and female of a Fortune 500 corporate art collection. Traveling the world over, she was responsible for buying and commissioning pieces of artwork for AT&T Corporation in its heyday. So I am the product of two people who lived and pursued their purpose and their passion, and who taught me to do the very same. And so with that upbringing, I've been fortunate, I've been blessed to, to live in constant pursuit of my purpose and my passion. And for me, that is living to serve others and uplifting others so that we all may live better. That's who I am. That's my background.
So, did you ever think about going into into the faith world as well? You're there in FPWA, but you don't have, the best of my knowledge, you don't have ordination. Did you ever think of doing that?
Hey, you're a good friend. I'll just put it out there. I've taken to calling myself a leader of faith. Whereas others are faith leaders, ordained faith leaders, I call myself a leader of faith. And I don't know. I'm going to be honest, very honest with you and very open. My father was from the South, and Southern Black Baptists did not believe that women should preach and should be in the quote pulpit. And so I grew up under that. And while I don't share that same view, I do sometimes wonder if that maybe in some way or another, my father being one of my greatest champions and having poured so much into me, if that in some way maybe conditioned me to not think that that necessarily was my path, my chosen path. So I like to think that I have ministry in service of others and that I bring my faith to my work, all that I do, but I'm not ordained.
But you did go to law school.
I went to law school.
So did you think when you decided to apply to law school that your path spiritually would be enhanced by receiving a law degree?
I went to law school because I didn't know what I wanted to do or be in life. And as I shared, my parents, they lived their purposes. So I grew up in this household where you do what you've been called, what you've been purposed to do. And coming out of college, not really being certain about a career, I talked with many people. One of them was my uncle, who was a lawyer, and he said to me, these are his express words, Michael. He said, go to law school, and while you're there, you'll figure it out. And then he went on to say, and if you don't, that's okay, because people think that lawyers can do anything short of practicing medicine. And I'd been a chemistry major, and he added, you were a chemistry major. So, if you wanted to go to med school, then that would be just easy to do now, but clearly you don't. So I went to law school, and I found out that Uncle Clayton was right, because in my second year of law school, while searching for a law review note topic, I happened upon a case of it was a case of significant severe child abuse that actually resulted in the child killing his parent. And the reason it caught my attention was because I did not know that, I guess maybe in some ways I've been sheltered, that abuse could be so severe that it could affect the mental and emotional well-being of children so drastically. And that just moved me into a place and space where I wanted to learn as much as I could about children who suffer at the hands of their parents. And very often good people who do things that aren't the best for their children. And it was through that I actually realized that God was speaking to me and was saying, I want you to work on behalf of my vulnerable children. And the rest is history. Now nearly, 20, I guess I'm coming up on 27 years. That's been my work, and that's been my calling.
So thank you for that. I actually, before I ask my next question, I actually thought very, very briefly, fleetingly, about applying to law school, and I really wasn't certain that what I wanted to do with my life. And when I went to like a guidance counselor, and he knew who my father was as a rabbi, and he said to me almost in these words, says, "You're a miller. Get your," the Hebrew word is smicha, but get your ordination. So I used my rabbinic training as a springboard for engaging what I ended up for the past 30 plus years in the community relations field, and trying to help other people. But I think that both my—
Let me just say to you, you actually got your law degree, didn't you? Because what is the Supreme
Yes.
Law?
Yeah. I went through the same pains as many law students did. Some very, very difficult challenges going through school, and of course understanding law, in this case Jewish law. In a way, very well said. I guess I did, but I don't have the JD or the LLB, but I have my ordination, my smicha. I think that both myself and others might not know very much about the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies other than the name itself, but what's under the name? What does FPWA represent?
Absolutely. Delighted to share this. So FPWA is now nearly 100 years old. We are 2 years shy of our 100th birthday. And what is interesting to note is how it came into being. It was established to sit alongside the United Jewish Association Federation of New York and Catholic Charities at the policymaking table, at government's table. Because back during that time, and for 40, 50, 60 years beyond its founding, social services in New York City were doled out. And New York City was very much like other cities and jurisdictions. Services were doled out based on religious affiliation. So if you were of the Jewish faith, then you were served and supported by Jewish social service organizations, Catholic the same. And if you were Protestant, or they could not give you a religious designation, they lumped you into Protestant. And so when decisions were being made by government about child care and child welfare and public supports for women, there needed to be at the table someone or some institution representing the Protestant and all other. And that's why FPWA came into being. So now, nearly 100 years later, what's all the more interesting is that We are still faith-based, and we still have many Protestant religious organizations under our umbrella, be they Baptist, Episcopalian, Pentecostal, and more, Lutheran, Methodist. They're all under our umbrella, but we actually have organizations of other faiths. We have Jewish organizations that are under the FPWA umbrella. We have Catholic organizations. There are Buddhist and Muslim organizations that fall under the umbrella, as well as secular organizations. And I believe that is because what we've come to help people understand and appreciate is that the work that we do concerns everybody who's in need. So we're an anti-poverty social and policy advocacy organization. We have better than 170 member agencies providing services daily throughout New York City. And we have many more faith-based partners, again, of different faiths. And we all work together to make sure that on a day-to-day basis, people's needs are being met, but that we're also working to affect and effect changes in systems policy to bring about greater benefits and greater supports for people in need and the agencies that serve them.
Thank you for that. Is it predominantly African-American, Black, or is it across the board?
It's across the board. It's across the board. If I had to venture a guess, it is probably, in terms of leadership, majority white, because the majority of institutions with government funding in New York City are majority white. Then African American to follow, then people of Hispanic descent, Asian Americans, and the full array of Asian Americans.
So, you and I have had this conversation just between you and me, but
Are you telling our secrets?
There is a Jewish Federation, there's an Asian Federation, there's a Latino Federation, but there is no Black Federation. Why?
You know, there have been attempts at that, at creating that through the years. There used to be a gentleman by the leading in the space. I believe his name was Horace. I'm drawing a blank on his last name. I can't remember with certainty. Who worked with the United Way of New York City to create the Black Equity Alliance, the BEA, and it survived for just a short while. The belief being that, you know, Black minority agencies have struggled through the years to secure funding, to maintain contracts, and we moved to a space where we had more Black-led mainstream organizations. I think, yeah, as is the case with many organizations that struggle for foundation, they struggle for funding, that was one of the greatest challenges.
One of the greatest challenges that I think that the Black community faces, Jewish community faces as well, but it would be under a different heading, is racism, and for us it's anti-Semitism. And I think one of the reasons why the Federation was created was because the Jewish community was not wanted. It was just not allowed, permitted to join other umbrella groups. That's one of the reasons why Mount Sinai Hospital was established. The original name for Mount Sinai Hospital here in New York was Jews Hospital, because Jewish doctors weren't allowed to practice in other hospitals, like Presbyterian Hospital, as an example, which is a Protestant establishment. Well, I want to get into the racism issue, but from a different angle, and that's the angle of the pandemic. It certainly appears, and I think that the numbers bear this out, that the majority of those who contract the virus, the coronavirus, are minorities. And the question, of course, is why? And is the treatment that they are receiving equal to the treatment that others are receiving. It appears as well that healthcare disparities is a significant issue in the dealing with this pandemic. Is that the way that you see it?
Yes, so this all ties back to in America, poverty and access to healthcare. And and underlying all of that is systemic racism. So what we've seen in New York, what we've seen in Chicago, what we've seen in Atlanta and other urban environments is that Black persons are disproportionately affected and longitudinally, if you will, impacted by COVID-19. And one first asks, why is that? Why so many people? And first and foremost, it has everything to do with wealth or lack of wealth, income, access to healthcare, types of jobs that are performed, pre-existing conditions, and all of that ties back to poverty and the link between poverty and race and racism. So if you are in New York and you live in a densely populated community, then the likelihood of spread is greater. If you live in New York and you live in a densely populated community and you are an essential worker out there going to and from work on the New York City subway or in the bus, right? And you are coming into contact with more and more people, and you might be a healthcare aide in the hospitals or in the nursing homes where there was a great uptake of COVID-19. Maybe you are a delivery person. You're interacting with more and more people, right? So then you pick up the disease and then you get back on the subway and you bring it back to your community. And if you're living on top of each other, then the spread is going to be greater. And what happened in the Black community, as well as in the brown community in New York City, is that before we started getting understanding what it meant to wear a mask and the value out of wearing a mask, it had already begun to spread. Additionally, we still had to come back out. The people doing deliveries, whether it be food deliveries or packages, people going to work as essential workers, as healthcare aides, working in custodial positions, working as correction officers, right? The list goes on and on. We still had to do that work and then come back into our communities. So that brought about the increased spread and the positivity. And then the positivity rates. Now, why did we see greater deaths among people of color? Because of, and now this is another racial element, the lack of access to affordable and quality healthcare, which is tied to income and wages, right? And we know that Black people are the lowest paid employees, even doing the same jobs. Black women are the lowest paid people, paid 64 cents for every dollar earned by a white male, right? So you're doing these jobs, you cannot afford quality health care, but you also are living under the stresses of poverty, right? So what happens when you're stressed out from poverty? Your mental stability can be off, but your health is also affected by the stresses, right? We also know that we live in the Black and brown communities in food deserts. We know that we have greater pollutants in those communities, greater likelihood of being exposed to lead poisoning, other environmental hazards, the negative associated with pest infestation. And so all of these create these challenges when it comes to health, greater asthma and lung issues, which are a problem when it comes to COVID-19. Diabetes and obesity, being overweight, is another comorbidity with COVID-19. And the list goes on and on and on, which then made for a greater likelihood of death among Black people. And so the racism tie here is that its underpinnings all tied to the social determinants of health. And so if your health is compromised by your income and by all the stresses, that come with poverty and that come with being Black in America. Let's just put it out there. Over policing, inequitable justice systems, lack of quality access to public education, all of that then sets you up to be more victim to something like COVID-19.
That's very helpful in educating us as to how the Black community is more impacted by, and tendencies are that it would be more impacted by this horrible pandemic. And we in the Jewish community, and you and I have talked about this, I think that many organizations, including JCRC, have come out very strongly in combating systemic racism. But so where is it that you see the role that the Jewish community potentially can play in maybe more intentionally within this space?
So first, let me thank you. I appreciate all that you did and all that you do to bring forth the voice of the community, to stand with other sometimes marginalized and oppressed communities. Sometimes it can be very challenging to do so, but you all acted with courage and bold, appreciating that an injustice visited upon any one of us. Just paraphrasing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I think that in these moments we have to center on not falling back. There is the tendency for us to come out in these moments and to join up and to be immediately responsive. But then things die down, the dust settles, and we can, we're quick to fall back. And so what I would ask you to ask of me in terms of joining up and partnering with people of the Jewish faith to stand against, bias and prejudice against Jewish persons. I'm asking the same of you concerning, what is experienced by Black persons with regard to racism. When the dust settles, when the noise dies down, let us remain ever vigilant. I had a recent challenge working with another group in the faith community, where we were talking about building out equity pillars and helping people to appreciate, how do we go about as a city, as a state, as a nation, in advancing equity in income and wages, in education, in healthcare, mental health supports, in housing. And then we got to criminal justice. And there was we can't talk about criminal justice. It's too political. It's too polarizing. And it was like, can we just stay in this conversation together and work it through? No, we don't have to be out there all together. Like, maybe I don't agree with how they go about talking about defunding the police, right? But it doesn't mean that we can't talk about the resources that are needed to support Black and brown communities that have been oppressed. And so that was disheartening, because it was like, this is that opportunity. We know the intersection, the inextricable link between race and poverty and justice in America. And if we say that we're only, if we say as allies, we're only going to focus on two, right? If I say to you, I'm only going to work with you on social welfare and joined up, shared, like commonalities in our religion, but I'm going to step away when it comes to acts of anti-Semitism, then I'm not being a true partner. Right. And so that's what I think we can do. Lean in, even when it gets difficult, and try to press to find that common ground and not step away.
I'm going to ask another question in a second, but we do have our sponsor that I really want to give credit to for ensuring that we have these opportunities to have these kinds of conversations. So let me just say that this episode Once again, of Community Relations Corner is sponsored by the Free Synagogue of Flushing, serving the Reformed Jewish community in Queens, New York for over a century. Visit freesynagogueflushing.org to view its magnificent stained glass sanctuary and immerse yourself in a piece of Queens Jewish history. One of the things, Jennifer, I love for you to see eventually when we come out of this pandemic is to see the beautiful sanctuary of the Free Synagogue in Flushing. All are invited to join for a wide array of programming and webinars, and the beautiful sanctuary, social hall, and meditation garden are available for rental to add to your joyous occasion, to your simcha. Check out freesynagogueflushing.org to learn more about their Shabbat and their high holiday, now the Yom Kippur on Sunday night and Monday services, and weekly Sunday school. Once again, visit freesynagogueflushing.org. Back to the question. I still remember it. And that is sometimes when it comes to the pain of others, there's an expectation that the other actually feels the pain of the person who is suffering. But there is sometimes where the other doesn't experience it and needs to be tapped on the shoulder and say, hey, Michael, do you understand what's happening here? And the same thing goes the other way around. When the Jewish community is suffering because of discrimination, particularly because of anti-Semitism, as we saw before COVID-19 hit, and it's kind of like a wake-up call. Our wake-up call during this period, during this time frame, is the ram's horn, is the shofar. And I think there's a need for a shofar blowing the entire year from one ethnic and one faith community to the others, so we know what we are feeling. And I think that's one of the most positive things that have come out of our developing this electronic relationship of being able to speak to each other and kind of unload. And, do you realize that? Do you know that? And I think that there needs to be much more of that going on than there is at the moment.
Oh, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. I think that what we have lost sight of in this ever moving forward, rapid paced society in which we live is the value add of conversation and leaning in and listening one to another. We're so often involved in meetings or events where it's, okay, what are we doing and what's the outcome that results, and not taking the time to just listen and be with one another and share experience. I've learned so much from you, the kind of the othering, understanding the other's experience and the other's perspective. One of the things that I think is painfully made clear in this moment is, as we talk about, what's happening in our society and the need to lean in and understand racial inequity more and the experience of other, we're all learning the role that we each play in it. Even I, as a Black woman, in perpetuating systemic racism, whether I intended or not. In some ways, I show up in the space, just being a part of it. And having those conversations allows me to unpack some of that and then think differently about it.
Well, one of the things that we're doing at JCRC is creating, and we've talked about this, but it's happening now, to create a healthcare disparities coalition, so that we have, and we talked about having somebody from FPWA serve on that coalition, but we also have a Jewish coalition on the criminal justice reform. So we're trying to be in as many, that's the community relations field, as we really do need to experience, to the extent that we can, or at least to sense the anguish of the other, and to do what we can as members of our faith to respond, or as a collective of faith groups to respond as well, which gets me to my next question. Faith groups, which are our houses of worship. I know firsthand, and many who are viewing this know firsthand, what we've experienced over the course of the high holiday period. In the Orthodox world within which I live, I just prayed outside. I pray outside every day at a service, twice a day, but for Rosh Hashanah, it was cold, and yeah, we were outside under a tent in a neighbor's backyard, and it was a challenging experience, I think it made us concentrate all the more on our prayers. And in other movements, the prayers were communicated electronically through Zoom and other platforms. How has this pandemic impacted on the Christian faith? What have you experienced? What have you heard back from your member organizations, let alone Bethany, where you go to pray? What's happening there? Are people going to church?
Yeah.
And also the impact, Jennifer, on fundraising,
Oh, yeah.
because what happens in church, many know, there's the passing of the plate, but if there's nobody to pass the plate to, the plate remains empty. So this
So,
can be very,
so like you, I always say I get to bring my whole self to work. And it's a gift, it's a blessing to be able to, on a daily basis, bring your faith into your workspace and the matters that concern you, including your faith community and how your faith community is faring in the midst of crisis. So the short, I've talked to people and engaged with faith leaders leading, I should say, faith organizations across the city of New York and beyond, around the country. And what I repeatedly, consistently hear is, if you were an organization that was, living in the 21st century, and you were doing fairly well with respect to membership size and fundraising capacity before COVID-19, then there's a good likelihood that you're still doing fairly well. If you were an organization that had already ventured into the live streaming space, and you had the resources and the technology to support that, then when you had to, because of COVID-19, shut down your in-house worship and move online, your community just moved with you because they'd already learned how to do it. They were already familiar with it. You might have had to tinker your worship experience to decrease it in length, to make it more interactive in ways that you could online, but you were already there pretty much. And if you were, then you're not really struggling. In fact, you're actually, in some instances, what I've heard from some faith leaders, they're actually doing better, because what has now happened as a leader running a Christian church and being online is that the church down the street that maybe is not resourced and is not as technologically savvy,
yes.
doesn't have it does not have a repository, cannot receive the individual or family that wants to worship. So what do? They remember that church on the corner has a big following, and they go hook up with that church, and then they give that church their tithes and their offerings. The other thing is that churches around the country, if they have leaders who are known, either in their communities or in their nation, they're doing all kinds of events, fundraisers. They're continuing the work online. It is those small, more like, as we say in the Christian community, storefront churches that are struggling. And the challenge,
we have them too in the Yiddish.
Oh, you have?
It's called a stiebel, but storefront, yeah, they exist.
And the challenge there, Michael, as you well know, is that if they were challenged before, the people who probably attend them are the ones who are least or less financially stable.
Right.
And so it's just kind of like this snowballing effect.
So is there going to be a sorting out when we emerge from this thing in a couple of months? Hopefully it's only a couple of months, but there's going to be a sorting out where who's going to make it, who's not going to make it. And we say in our prayers on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, mi yachye mi yamut, who's going to live and who's going to die. Mi b'kitzo, mi lo b'kitzo, who at a designated time and who before their designated time. So is the time coming for there to be a sorting out of houses of worship in New York?
You know what I actually think? I think it's going to be a sorting for those houses that were once kind of giant institutions, but today do not have the congregations and the funding. I think the big institutions that have been able, that had going into COVID-19, that base will thrive. And then I think that you'll see among the storefronts, storefronts, you're so small, you can go into somebody's home, right? And kind of rebuild again.
Yeah.
So they may not go completely away. They just may shift in how they deliver worship experience. I think it's going to be those faith communities that once were big in number and don't have the resources anymore, that have been just holding on, by threads to keep their doors open, that are going to fall by the wayside.
I think we don't have enough time to deal with it today, but in our one-on-ones, we'll probably talk about the real estate industry and what impact the abandonment of those storefronts is going to have with, again,
or predators coming in saying, I'm going to give you the sun, moon, and stars.
Right. Again, we're kind of running out of time, and I wanted to get to the political question, which again we have talked about one-on-one between in our weekly conversations. But we all know that there's going to be a mayoral election a year from November, and particularly with the ranked choice voting, which a lot of people don't understand. I even asked you in our last conversation, please explain it to me. What are people going to be looking for? I'm not going to pin you down on who it is that you're looking at right now, unless you feel like you want to in front of all these people. But what do you think New Yorkers are going to be looking for in their next leader of this city? One of the ways that I got to know you was when you were the co-chair of Bill de Blasio's transition team in the first term. And I had the honor of serving on that transition team in one of the panels. So we sort of knew then who Bill de Blasio was, and Bill de Blasio has evolved during the course of as every mayor does. What are we looking for now with November 2021 looming ahead? And it's much before that. It's probably going to be determined by the Democratic primary, whenever that date is going to be in 2021.
So I think there are going to be a number of things that people are going to be looking for. I think that we're all going to be very much concerned about the rebuild of New York City. And there is going to be a necessary rebuilding of the city. It doesn't mean that buildings are going to have to be rebuilt, but I'm talking about an economic and social rebuild. I'm talking about an educational rebuild. And so I think people are going to be and should be centered on that and what it will take to achieve that. I believe people are going to be looking to hear how the candidates define what rebuild is. Those who have struggled in New York City socioeconomically are going to look to hear themselves heard, seen in the message around equity and opportunity. I believe those who have not struggled are going to be centered on how the rebuild is, like how it benefits them in terms of the business growth and continued development of their businesses. So people are going to be centered on what rebuild is and what it looks like for each and every one of us. We're going to need to be centered on who can manage the rebuild. It is not enough. It is not enough to have somebody who talks the talk. We can have people who speak to our needs and they pull on our heartstrings, but if they cannot manage this city out of the economic downturn that it's in, we're going to be in a deeper hole. And so, I would say that people are going to look for vision, but they're going to look for that vision to match their reality. And then they're going to look for somebody who can take the vision and the reality and create a business plan for actually implementing it. That's what I'm going to be looking for. Okay. It's not going to be enough for me for you to sing to me and make me feel good. And I'm a little anxious. I think we're going to need somebody who's shown us that they do know how to both lead and manage.
And you decided that you're not going to throw your hat into the ring, right?
Only if you give it a try and you say no, it's not for me.
No, not me. But the one thing that you haven't mentioned, I'm curious how you're going to respond. Where does race play a role in determining who the next mayor is going to be? So it's a wide open question. Now, there could be the race of the individual or the racial issues. Is that going to loom large when the mayoral campaign really begins in earnest?
I
Race.
think politics is going to be infused with race, and New York City politics are going to sit in the larger dish slash petri dish, one might say, that is national politics. I think that if the if the Democrat ticket wins at the national level, you may have people who are progressive say, you know, we've checked that box on the Black female. Maybe not. You may have here in New York City people who will say, looking at New Orleans, looking at San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, D.C., they've had their first Black female leader. We should too. That may be the case. The flip is that people may say, race and gender aside, we are in financial dire straits, and we need the best candidate to bring us out of this economic downturn, given that person's skills, background, experience. That may be a Black female, it may be a Black male, it may be a white female, it may be a white male. So I think what's going to happen is it's yet to be determined. I think there is going to be some influence from the 2020. And then I think as we get deeper into the race, we're going to look at New York City and see where we are. Do we feel that we're in a good place, economically speaking? Do we feel like we've got a good handle on the education rebuild, the health rebuild, the communities rebuild? And if we do, maybe we're going to take, you know, like we're going to say, we're going to go based on what we believe should be, our next mayor should look like. And I'm not dismissing people's perspective and experience and what they bring to the table. I'm just saying, I think these are going to be some of the big issues.
Well, I so much love talking to you, Jennifer. I'm sure that our viewers, our watchers and listeners are going to be jealous of the fact that you and I are going to be having another conversation very soon. And I would love to get you back on our community relations corner, not too far down the road. We've got a lot of people on the list, but
I'm honored.
Yeah, this is really great, and it's always a pleasure talking with you and learning from you and expanding my horizons on so many different issues. And thank you very much for agreeing to come on, and thank you for being the wonderful friend that you are, and the wonderful service that you have provided to New York. So
all that you said, right back at you. I feel the very same. Thank you.
Well, to all of our viewers, watchers, and listeners, please go to fpwa.org to learn more about the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies and the great work that Jennifer and her organization do. And again, it's been an absolute delight to have you on for the past hour. And I want to thank once again, and I'm sure you do too, but it'll be my voice, thank our sponsor. This episode of the Community Relations Corner is sponsored by the Free Synagogue of Flushing, serving the Reformed Jewish community in Queens, New York for over a century, now led by a board member of JCRC, Ed Schauder, and Alan Brava is their cantor. Visit freesynagogueflushing.org to view its magnificent stained glass sanctuary and immerse yourself in a piece of Queens Jewish history. All are invited to join for a wide array of programming and webinars, and the beautiful sanctuary, social hall, and meditation garden are available for rental to add to your joyous occasions, to your simchas. Check out freesynagogueflushing.org to learn more about their Shabbat and high holiday services. Again, Yom Kippur is Sunday night and Monday, and weekly Sunday school. Once again, please visit freesynagogueflushing.org. My thanks and Jennifer's thanks, our thanks to our audience for joining us live. I'm Michael Miller, and I've been for the past hour with Jennifer Jones-Austin, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Community Relations Corner. Shana Tova, a good year to all. Shalom, bracha, blessing, and peace to everyone. Take good care.
Blessings.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Bye.